Well, it's late at night. I'm kind of bored, don't really have anything better to do. So how's about I share with all of you on YouTube my latest curbside discount computer system find. Hello there everyone, you've tuned in uxwbill. Just a little bit of a foreword before we get started. As some of you may very well be aware, here in the state of Illinois it has for several years now been illegal to place electronics in the conventional waste stream. You're supposed to take them to a recycling center or something along those lines. And as such, it has really put a hurtin' on my trash picking related activities. Especially since I used to be able to find a lot of this stuff, fix it up, and sometimes even turn a bit of a profit on it. Or at least get some interesting parts for some other project. So what did I find? Well, it seems those folks that threw out the Dimension 2300 and the 4100 so many years ago, this is evidently what they moved up to. This is a Dell Dimension 3000, and now its turn for the trash truck has come around. It's not quite as filthy as the other two computers were, but it's not exactly a model of cleanliness either, and by the time I happened to find this, it had been rained on. Another one of these nearly ubiquitous Dell E773 CRT monitors was with it. And as you can see, it's not exactly real clean either. In fact, it was much worse off than the computer, considering that it was still laying face down in the gravel and dirt at the end of these people's yard. But I went ahead and grabbed both pieces, saw them completely by chance, went over to check something out at the keykeeper's place. He had a concern about something, and after I got done, I just decided to take the long way back home, and I'm kind of glad that I did, because out of the corner of my eye, even though it was a very dark and rainy night, I happened to catch sight of this computer. So let's go ahead and take a look at it and see what we've got, and then we'll fire it up. Hopefully not literally. But we're just going to plug it in and see what happens. It's been about a week and a half since I collected it, and I have not tried to see if it works or not. So whatever it does, it'll be the first time anyone's seen it. Here we have a compact disc recordable and rewritable drive. Not even a DVD-ROM drive on this one, which is kind of funny because I think their previous Dimension 2300 actually did in fact have a DVD-ROM drive. And if it didn't, I think maybe the 4100, I know it had an add-on optical drive that may have been capable of reading DVDs. There's no floppy drive, so this thing's chances at being a real computer are severely hampered, but at least it regains a couple of points because it does have a full selection of legacy ports, including the surprisingly common loose screw-in connector on one of these ports. Probably the only one that was ever used apart from the PS2 ports, the audio ports, the network connector, and some of the USB ports. As one of these infamous Datech fans, these things are amazing in that usually they become extremely loud when their bearings wear out, but unlike any other fan, you can try to oil them and it will do you absolutely no good. They just remain noisy forever. At least it's not too terribly difficult to replace them with something a little bit better, although you might have to graft on a connector. And now, we'll go ahead, lay this thing down on its side. Shipped with Windows XP Home Edition. It'll be interesting to see if that's what it's actually running. And this is a Dell Dimension 3000 that actually has a different, later style motherboard in it. I don't know why Dell decided to do so, but there were two motherboards that were found in the Dell Dimension 3000. The earlier board actually has an AGP slot artifact above the PCI expansion slots, and it also has places for serial ATA connectors. This later board has neither one of those things, and in fact this later board is more commonly seen, at least until relatively recently from my experience, in the short-lived Dell Dimension B110 series. I don't know why Dell ever manufactured the B110. I don't know if they were trying to use up a surplus of parts or what exactly the idea was. This particular board is nothing more than an Intel desktop board that bears the Dell branding. The Dimension 3000 board looks like more of a Dell original design, but they must be almost completely identical because the same BIOS updates apply to both. And of course the B110, I don't think it ever got any flash BIOS updates. Let's see what kind of microprocessor we have here. Must be something that's clocked at 2.8 gigahertz or faster. It claims to be a real Pentium 4, not just a Celeron, because this is the upgraded performance heatsink that Dell used for processors faster than, I think, 2.8 gigahertz and up. Got the use of this enhanced performance heatsink. It's made of copper, so it should expel heat a bit better. Speaking of heat, none of these capacitors are bloated or blown up. All the wiring looks intact. Everything still seems to be plugged in. Judging by the salmon color of these cables, I would say this machine was probably smoked around. That's probably nicotine residue. So this was a little bit of an upgrade from the 2300 and certainly the 4100 that these people had previously, but it wasn't a huge upgrade. Really all it got them was a better chipset, a faster microprocessor, and the ability to support more RAM installation, more RAM to be installed than was supported by either the 2300 or the 4100. So now that we've had a quick little overview of the hardware, I'm going to say it's not in terrible shape. It should clean up nicely. We're just about ready to go ahead and power it up. Now there are some of you in the viewing audience who are probably saying, Bill, why'd you even bother with a Pentium 4? And the answer is, I really don't anymore unless they are free. This one certainly fits that qualification. After all, it came to me from the curb. Most of the time, it's really not even worth bothering with something like this anymore. These days, Core 2 Duo-based systems are essentially free or very close to. They'll run rings around even the best Pentium 4s in terms of performance. They consume far less power and they throw off much less heat. And they can do something this particular system can't do, and that's run 64-bit software, which is finally getting to be actually somewhat important in this day and age. There are some high-profile software products, particularly Linux distributions, that have decided they are not going to offer an official 32-bit x86 build any longer. And while I personally disagree with their doing so, I can understand why. After all, the last 32-bit processors at this point are essentially no younger than 10 years old. Oh sure, there's a few outliers here and there. I actually have a 2010 era Lenovo IdeaPad Mix 10 craplet thing that's got a 32-bit only microprocessor, much to my amazement. But it's not the point of this video. Let's go ahead and get that monitor up here and just see what this crazy thing happens to do when I plug it in. Not long after I picked them up, both computer and monitor got to spend quite a bit of quality drying out time with some assistance from this friendly blower wheel. In a way, I actually feel somewhat cheated because neither computer nor monitor actually came with any power cords. And I looked, I didn't see any laying around. I didn't even get a keyboard or a mouse. What a cheat! Alright folks, I've stalled long enough. I can't possibly put it off any more than I already have, other than by sharing some of my prognostications about what will happen with you. I figure the computer will probably work. The monitor, I have to admit, I don't know. That's why I haven't even bothered cleaning it up. But I've got everything plugged into an outlet strip here. Plugged into one of my very convenient electrical adapters that's sure to put the YouTube Fire Brigade and Electricians Bureau up in arms straight away. Being used as a convenient extension cord here. We'll just go ahead and plug this in. Smoke test! Alright, I didn't hear anything. So nothing blew up. Power is in fact turned on to that thing. The computer might very well have a bad power supply because I didn't even hear it start and then shut down. Let's see if this poor train wreck of a monitor can do anything. Oh man, I don't believe it. The degauss coil came up. There goes the sweep circuitry. No signal. And you know what's amazing about that? Now I know this isn't a real conclusive test just yet because it's not a full screen image, but as much as this monitor seems to have been thrown around, I'm shocked that there aren't any purity errors from a dislodged shadow mask inside the CRT, where of course you can't fix it. Of course I just realized, since it's telling me that the cable isn't connected, that I didn't actually hook it up to the computer. There we go, monitor shuts down now. So we'll just have to see if the computer actually powers up and does anything. or if it proceeds directly to the scene of the fire, or the explosion if I'm really unlucky. It's got power. Got a power on self-test. Well, something bad did happen. As soon as I turned it on, I heard Furhead's Jeep pull up outside. Well, it certainly looks encouraging at first blush. Windows is trying to boot. It's taking a very, very long time though, and the hard drive LED is on solid. So this machine could very well have a hardware problem. I wonder if this mouse I picked out is actually one of the units that still happens to work. These came from a previous job of mine, and these were used extremely heavily. And a lot of them just died suddenly. I'm being welcomed. See if the mouse pointer actually moves. And apparently whoever that is, I have no idea, that they love their little sister. And the picture on the monitor is rather grossly out of adjustment. As far as I can tell, these two were probably used together. I don't know why they didn't keep the previous E773 that I picked up all those years ago, which I still have. It still works just fine. But what amazes me about these things, for the fact that they were one of the last CRT monitors to be offered for sale by any computer manufacturer, they were undoubtedly made by whatever no-name Chinese OEM could do so the cheapest. I've never, ever seen one of these things that had a bad picture. They've always been just an outstanding performer. They've got good color purity, brightness. They seem to be long-lived. I've never seen a dead one. I ought to clean this poor thing up. Seems like the least I could do for it. So I think I'll do that, and I'll be back. You know, usually when I go looking for stuff in the garage, I never am able to find what I want, because Furhead, and to a lesser extent Keykeeper, that's Furhead's workbench right there, they just kind of throw things around without any real regard for what goes where, which is why this garage is presently such a mess. I mean, I have my own contributions, like all that stuff over there, but at least I'm trying to keep it relatively contained to that one wall. I need to buy some shelving when next I've actually got the money to do so. Getting off the subject a bit there, I actually managed to find the window cleaner right away, and something that I could use to apply it in the form of this old bath towel. And the CRT has really come around. It's cleaned up pretty nicely. Doesn't look like there's any deep scratches in the glass, not even any minor ones. A little bit of scuffing up here. Unfortunately, this monitor is probably bound for the recycling, because it seems to have done an awful lot of hours, and whoever was previously using it, I don't know if they never bothered to set it up correctly, or if they were trying to compensate for that, because both the brightness and contrast values were cranked to nearly the maximum of their adjustment range. They were both sitting at nearly 100. I don't know if that accelerates CRT wear or not, other than through possible burn-in. I've always been of the impression that the harder you run a CRT in terms of brightness and contrast, the faster you're going to wear it out. But maybe that's not true. I'd certainly welcome some input from those of you in the viewing audience who might be a little more informed about that than I am. Over here we have the computer. I went ahead and cleaned off the outside of the case just very quick and dirtily. Didn't really get all the stuff off the front. Found something very interesting inside. It looks like this computer is definitely a male because it has a mustache. All over those buttons and LEDs and stuff. We'll have to shoo that out of there. There went the mouse. If it did work, it probably doesn't now. Just clean this off. Perhaps most amazingly though, this thing's hard drive is still pretty silent. Now when I looked up the service tag, it seemed to indicate, if I remember correctly, and I've slept since then so I probably don't, that this thing had a 40 gigabyte Maxtor hard drive in it. I have not tried to determine the capacity. I also don't know if it's the original. Knowing most people's track record with Maxtor drives, it could very well have been replaced. But I figured it probably couldn't be one of those because this hard drive is running almost silently. And the Western Digitals, the few Quantums that were still around at that point, and the Maxtors of that time, if you gave them enough time, they all got to be incredibly loud as the bearings in the spindle motor slowly gave out. But Seagate seems to have perfected the fluid dynamic bearing motor a lot sooner than everybody else, or they bought from a supplier that just happened to do a better job. It's definitely a Seagate drive in there. And based on that logo, I would say it's got to be newer than the rest of the system. I don't know when they started using the thumbprint logo that you can just barely see there. So maybe the drive was replaced under warranty. I wouldn't be totally surprised, or even in the aftermarket. There's some insulating material in there. And plenty of fluff in here too, although apart from that little mustache problem it had earlier, it doesn't seem to have inhaled the family cat or anything. So I guess we'll go ahead and just throw it back together after I do a little bit more cleaning up. The more this computer has operated, the more I've noticed that it really doesn't smell very good, despite the fact that it's a lot cleaner than the other two I picked up so many years ago. It smells kind of like a sick mix between nicotine, cigarette tar, and some sort of a candy smell that maybe was somebody's idea of an attractive perfume. Ugh. I also want to take a moment and note that this little mustache that was in the front doesn't actually come apart. So I'm not totally sold on that being dust. I'm thinking maybe that is pet hair of some kind. Icky. Let's power this thing up and take a wander through system setup. Hear how quiet that hard drive is? I really don't hear it at all, just hear system fan noise. See if we have a working optical drive, and if maybe we got a free disk in there. Looks like it's got a blown tray belt. I don't have my magic paper clip of encouragement to get it to open up. So here's the processor specification. Imagine that, a Prescott in one of these low-end machines. Hard to believe somebody actually sprung for the better microprocessor in this. System time and date are correct. At least they're close enough. Let's see what our hard drive configuration is. Just one hard drive in it, of course. 40 gigabytes in size. So it must be an older drive. Don't actually know how old it is. Haven't had it out of there yet. We have 1 gigabyte of installed memory. I noticed there was an upgraded module in place here, although it appeared that it was only 512 megabytes in size, and the other one indicated that it was 256 megabytes in size. Here's the information about the microprocessor, about the various built-in hardware devices. Not really anything very interesting there. Put that on performance for all the good it'll do. Let's see what's in the system event log. How many times has this thing recorded something interesting over the entirety of its life? Have I ever told any of you out there how much I hate crickets? I certainly do, and I need to work at getting them out of this garage. Digression. A lot of keyboard errors over the years. If these people did have a little dog or cat or something, maybe it was always walking around on the keyboard. And of course, there's when they upgraded the memory. System seems to have been manufactured in late 2005. I'm sorry. July 10th, 2005 would appear to be the original time of the system event log being cleared when Dell actually assembled this thing. So it hasn't had a whole lot of stuff happen over the years other than a bunch of keyboard errors. And I suppose when you think about it, outside of the ones that happened in 2008 and 9, 7, 8, and 9, they really weren't that numerous in occurrence. But I guess they managed to get along pretty well with this thing's stock amount of memory in place for about, 6 or 7 years at least. So that's about all that can be said about this thing. Like I say, ordinarily I wouldn't bother picking one of these up, but I've almost become seriously attuned to the sight of potential treasures at the side of the road, probably an effect of the withdrawal I've been suffering now that these things aren't supposed to land up in the trash. So I picked this thing up mainly just for the thrill of the hunt, without all the blood and the meaty stuff and things like that, because I'm not really into that at all. I much prefer picking up wild computers that have been released by the roadsides by owners who no longer care about them. This particular system's copy of Windows has certainly been through the ringer. It appears to be the original installation. I'm sure you all saw that picture that flashed up there in the corner just momentarily before the welcome screen appeared. Not sure how the average end user figured out how to do something along those lines. When it boots up, we have a strange folder that appears at startup, something called Strong Vault. Don't know what that is, but from the name I'd guess that it's some sort of a file encryption program. Not sure why a folder window comes up when the computer starts, unless this program was at some point uninstalled and they didn't do it properly, leaving a shortcut that Windows probably automatically and rather cleverly turned into something else, although I don't see any evidence of anything in the startup folder on the start menu. There are some other interesting things that have happened to this, but the first thing we're going to do, we're going to get this thing wrangled into some semblance of sanity. Yeah, I know, I'm kind of old school here. The control panel is definitely a little screwed up. Got icons missing here and there. They're also not arranged very well, but that's not really a screw up per se. It's just that most people don't have automatic arrangement turned on. And then one of my favorite things to do, go ahead and enlarge the mouse pointer. A lot of people ask about why I do this, and mainly it's just a holdover from the fact that I've been working on computers for long enough that I can well remember a time when a lost mouse pointer was a very common problem due to the slow response time of passive matrix laptop displays, and they were monochrome laptop displays, mind you, not color ones. There were two solutions to this. You could go with a larger mouse pointer, or you could even do something like this. Although back in the Windows 3.1 days, the pointer trails only ever seemed to work properly with the Microsoft Windows VGA driver. If you dared to use the Super VGA drivers provided by your video chipset or computer manufacturer, you lost that capability. And it took Microsoft forever to put it back. It was present in Windows 95, but until Windows XP came along, the NT-derived versions of Windows didn't have the pointer trails option. It just makes it a little bit easier to find. And of course, one thing that I found on this computer right away was evidence of an extremely insidious virus, the Blue F of Doom. Yeah, you better stay well away from that, because that is dangerous. I could get very, very opinionated about that. And if you're wondering, no, I absolutely do not have any presence on Facebook, and there is no force on earth that could ever make me have a presence on it. I think it's a great idea, but the company itself is horrible, and there are very few people, to put this very bluntly, in this world that I would not cross the road to urinate on if they were on fire. Mark Zuckerberg is one of them, without question, so put that right in the trash. Doesn't look like this computer has suffered too much from malware infections. If there is any, it's not making itself particularly obvious. When I first started playing around with it, the screen was set to a rather bizarre 1280 by 960 resolution, which probably exceeds the capability of this CRT to resolve it. That's one of the places where a CRT monitor such as this still has a huge advantage over a liquid crystal display. You can run them at less than their native resolution, and you don't experience the blockiness, reduced size, or even scaling of text that happens on a monitor with a flat panel in it, such as an LCD or a plasma or something like that. It's because there's not a one-to-one mapping of the pixels on a CRT monitor as there is on another type of display, such as a liquid crystal panel or something. The mapping is rather loose leaf. Probably not the best explanation of it, but as far as I know, it is technically correct. So, for example, when I drop down to the 80 by 25 character, well, no, this is more than that. This is the 132 line mode. Should have remembered that that's what Windows 2000 and later generally default to when you bring the command prompt or Win32 console applications full screen. But as you can see, the CRT renders it in razor-sharp clarity, even as badly worn as this one seems to be. Whereas on a liquid crystal display, that would look at least somewhat blocky depending upon the scaling algorithm, or if there is not a scaling algorithm, it would simply be arranged such that it only fills a small portion of the entire display panel that you paid for. You can do the same thing within the graphical operating environment if you turn down the resolution to say 800 by 600. And the monitor promptly goes into an out of synchronization state that it can't display, or at least it would have if my usual run of luck were holding true here, but I guess it hasn't because this thing did not explode violently when I plugged it in. But again, as you can see, the CRT works natively at less than its rated resolution. It works perfectly well. I'm not expressing that very well at all. Uh-oh. It doesn't look good. Well, we're not keeping this copy of Windows. I'm just playing around with it at this point just to amuse myself. Here's 1152 by 864. And as you can see, the picture does need some adjustment. But this monitor's controls are more than capable of bringing it back around. I'm surprised that's not flickering more, to be honest, since it's running at a vertical scan of 72 Hertz. I had it set to 60 so that it would flicker almost invisibly if it was going to flicker at all. And I'd synchronize the camcorder shutter. Let's see here. I don't even know why I'm playing with this on video, but I'm sure that many of you out there will enjoy watching it nevertheless. I think I could probably make a video about coating a computer in Jell-O gelatin, and it would probably get a ton of views like all my computer videos do, but I don't think you have to worry about me doing that because I usually have higher standards than that. Here's the resolution that they were running at previously. And although you can see the text is rendered very clearly even at the monitor's edges, which is usually a difficult thing for a CRT to do well, the convergence, that is to say the points where all the individual phosphor triads come together as the electron gun scans them, usually that's difficult to maintain at the edges, especially for a cheap monitor. But this one seems to get it done quite well. Like I say, no matter how heavily used I've ever seen one of these Dell monitors, I've never seen one that had a bad picture. They always just managed to have an outstanding picture quality. We could find out when Windows was installed on this machine. I'll go ahead and adjust this picture as well because, frankly, it kind of bugs me. There we go. I'd probably keep this monitor if it weren't for the fact that I didn't already have like 20 million of them. And they're all in great working order. Alright, where's the My Computer icon? Doesn't look like it showed up. Well, that's alright. We don't need it. We can always turn on the Explorer bar and get to My Computer that way. Well, that's exceptionally interesting. Wonder what clever clogs decide to name the hard drive System Tools. Adjust these view settings. I don't even know why I'm messing around with this, other than to say it just passes the time. V Westlife, fellow YouTube user V Westlife, turned me on to a trick that I didn't know about, where if you make the system volume information folder visible, we'll have to turn on the option to show hidden files and not hide protected operating system files. The aspect ratio of 1280 by 960 is wrong on this monitor. It looks weird. I know it's not very defensible, but I'm going to change it back. Oh, it's 1280 by 768. It's not 960. It doesn't stop at 960. I don't know what made me think it was 960, other than it's late and I'm probably getting tired. Alright, there we go. That's better. Looks much more like it. See if we can see that folder now. System volume information. I don't know if I have to take ownership of this to view the properties. But I'm going to take a guess that this is probably the original installation of Windows. Either that or this thing uses an image recovery approach, and so that folder isn't created in the normal way, and its date is therefore irrelevant. Alright, well I think that's enough playing around with the software and maundering about CRTs. Yes, that's your word for the day. It means talking about things in an unconnected way. And speaking of talking about things in an unconnected way, I'm sure I'm going to be caned down in the comments area for my pronunciation of the word pixel. It looks like this system's actually been sitting for a while. Last time it seems to have been used is sometime in April of 2014. And now it's time to PXE boot in the garage for fun and profit. Yeah, this is some high-tech diddling around here, folks. wipe the hard drive, upgrade the BIOS, and we'll get to find out along the way just how many hours worth of usage at least the system's hard drive has seen. And for those of you who have been asking periodically about my video concerning the setup and configuration of ERPXE, I want to assure you it is coming down the pipe at some point. It's just that I had expected these people to do a whole new release of their software and I was holding off. It doesn't look like that's something that's ever going to happen. So we go ahead and start with just wiping the hard drive here. Shouldn't take too long, although I am somewhat limited by the speed of the wireless link over here. Hey, it works. Really can't complain. I could, but who'd listen, you know? From the looks of things, I would say that the hard drive in this system is very probably the original, as it has managed to accrue a fairly large number of operating hours, 55,632 hours to be exact. Despite the rather large number of hours, this drive hasn't been turned on and off very often. It's only been power cycled 431 times, if the smart data is to be believed. Likewise, if the smart data is to be believed, it appears that this drive is otherwise in excellent health. So whatever I end up doing with this computer, it should be more than suitable for reuse. I'll just have to either fix this optical drive's tray loading belt or simply swap another one in there with greater capability, which is probably what I'll do if I end up utilizing this system in any sort of a capacity where optical drive capability is important. If I had a bunch of these blanks sitting around and I didn't need the optical drive, I'd almost be tempted just to pull it out, put a blank on it. I actually did that with an Optiplex GX620 just to be funny and to drive home the joke, although I figure there are exactly 2 people in the world who'd laugh about it, and one of them's me. I named that machine Mediaplex. I gave it a host name of Mediaplex despite the fact that it had no disk drive and no CD-ROM drives of any kind. Things that I do to amuse myself. It's just amazing sometimes. So, these, as you've probably figured by now, are the component parts of a Dell Dimension 3000 series personal computer. That's right, folks, this thing's all taken apart because I could figure no other way to try and get the horrible smell out of it than to put the whole mess into the dishwasher. For those of you that are newcomers to this channel, I have a video about that very exciting subject. Suffice it to say that as long as you allow everything, and I do mean everything right down to this power supply, ample time to dry out, it'll be fine. You also want to make sure that you remove any source of power from the motherboard, like its clock backup battery, which was very nearly dead in this particular system's case. Also looked like maybe it was starting to leak. It wouldn't have been worth doing this. As I said, this is a socket 478 Pentium 4. And in this day and age, when they're so easily stomped into the ground by even the most basically configured Core 2 Duo or better system, and those systems are almost free, why should you even bother with something like this? Well, I almost thought there was a reason to bother. I thought that maybe I had come across something of a holy grail, a mythical beast that I've never seen any concrete evidence of its existence. This machine bases on a Pentium 4 511 processor. It is a Prescott core, but it's a Prescott core. It's a very odd duck implementation of the Prescott core. It has a 533 megahertz front side bus, and on Intel's processor information website, there was something there that sent my spidey sense a tingling, and that was mention of x86 64, 64-bit capability, AMD 64. If you really want to credit the true inventors of the compatible 64-bit x86 extensions. Unfortunately, it seems that such capability does not run to the Socket 478 version of this chip, so it's really not very exciting after all. But I guess we ought to go ahead and throw this system back together and just see if it still works. The only thing that I have tested at this point, and even then it was only a plug-in test, to see if it would go bang, is this power supply. The dishwashing was not tremendously effective. You can still see it there on the heat sink for the north bridge of the chipset. And if you had smell-o-vision, you could smell it too. This thing would still smell like that nasty cross between cigarette tar and perfume. I may not keep this computer. It's very hard to tell. I'm a sucker for anything that comes along on curbside discount, but some things just aren't worth keeping. We'll go ahead and throw this back together anyway, because the video needs a sense of closure. And I figure that there are some of you out there that are very probably watching this and yelling at your monitor, or at least speaking to your monitor as though it, or worse than that, I would answer you and say, you would say, "Don't stop now, Bill, I've got nothing better to do." And if your monitor were capable of speaking to you, or I could reach out and talk to you through it in real time and have an interactive discussion with you, what a feature that'd be. Not. Then I would say, no, I'm not going to cut this video short at this point. Why would I ever do anything that has anything to do with any concept whatsoever of brevity? I can see I haven't brought all of this system's component parts out here with me, and I don't have a Phillips screwdriver to hand, and I think my luck just ran out. I can't exert enough leverage on those screws to get them to come out of place. You may have noticed there's a certain modeling that has taken place on this case. That happened after its run-in with the dishwasher. It seems like maybe some sort of an electrolytic reaction, perhaps with the chemicals in my tap water, maybe even the dishwasher soap itself, or possibly even some of the residue that was on this machine. It might very well be conductive, but again, who really cares? If this thing goes back together and works, that's great, but if it doesn't, I'm not going to shed any real tears for it. You know, it's kind of funny how some of the more insignificant and ephemeral little bits of this computer followed me outside. I had the presence of mind to remember and bring them with me, while some arguably more important components like this cooling fan and this heatsink mounting frame and even this slightly previously enjoyed CR2032 battery all stayed inside. Initially I was going to take the attitude, well, who really cares anyway? And just slap the heatsink on top of the processor. Gravity will be sufficient to keep it in place for a test, and it's not like even a Pentium 4, especially one of the lower clocked ones such as this, can actually get hot enough in, say, 30 seconds worth of operation to do any real damage. But because of my unwavering dedication to you, the viewing audience, even though it is 3:30 in the morning as I record this, and I'll be uploading it here soon before I finally turn in for the night, or turn in for the morning, I guess I should say. I'm going to go ahead and put this into place. Watch me stab the motherboard from trying to do this one-handed. Or cross-thread it. I suppose that's a real possibility too, but again, who really cares? I'm thinking that I might strip this case, although this is not usually my style. I'm thinking that I might actually strip the internals out of this case. Maybe build a sleeper out of some much higher end parts the next time I decide to do any kind of a system build. Maybe stick just a minor performance boost in here, like say newer motherboard paired with an Intel Core i5 of some description, or even an i3. I've always been one to kind of like the value chips from Intel. I'm one of those weirdos who actually likes the Celeron. I think it can be a brilliant value for the money, even if it is cut down significantly from its full performance brethren. Alright, let's go ahead and just stick this heatsink in here. Might be able to figure out a way to keep that, because that solid copper heatsink with the heavy base plate with a copper inset on it, I suppose the outer frame is aluminum, I really don't know. It's a beautiful thing, nice and heavy. It's almost as heavy as a Power Macintosh MDD G4 heatsink that I've been working on that's solid aluminum by comparison. So we'll go ahead and stick the fan in here. This is always a little bit of a trick. What's even more amazing, this is a Datech fan. These things are famous for making all manner of terrible bearing noises. You can oil them and they'll never go quiet. I wanted to put this through the dishwasher, but I knew that if I did, it would get noisy. And I considered it just enough of a miracle that this thing still worked. I simply cleaned it off with an old bath towel and some glass cleaner. I got it far better than it was, but it still smells. So let's see if we can get this to go in here like it's supposed to. I never can quite line these up on the first try. But I think I got it then. Yeah, it looks like it's in at all 4 corners. So that's definitely a start. I'll go ahead and slip the old CR2032 into the motherboard. I'm not sure if this is leakage or just some sort of corrosion that's taken place over time, or maybe the infiltration of, again, cigarette smoke staining to the underside of the battery. It's pretty flat, but the machine wasn't complaining when I first powered it up. It still had the time and date set relatively close to correctly. I'll go ahead and put this shroud on top here. Just push that down. Hey, maybe I'll even plug in the fan. That'd be high end, wouldn't it? Technically speaking, I should have repasted the microprocessor and the heatsink, but again, who cares? I don't. Didn't bring the hard drive out here with me, so we'll be making a test without that. Nor did I think to bring the optical drive, but never mind. We've got enough here to see if this thing will boot up or blow up. It's coming up next. And of course, here comes the part of the video where I say those words that you all love so much. And I really want you to think very deeply about the lengths and depths to which I go for all of you in the viewing audience. Because this time around, you're getting not just 1 smoke test, but 2 smoke tests! Alright, nothing's gone foom yet. Thought the monitor was turned on. Apparently not. I have some post beeps from the system. It's really not very happy with me, but it does at least seem to be working. Of course, I did put a multimeter across the power supply, and as mentioned previously, I plugged it into the wall without having any of the rest of the once upon a time worthwhile and valuable computer to fry. We have some power on self-test lights there. Have 1 fan working. This is the time it'll blow up on me, just watch. I have 2 fans working. Smells kind of like a cross between dishwasher detergent and terrible perfume, which is actually something I can live with. Oh, I remembered to bring these outside, but forgot to put them on there. Of course, I didn't bring the optical drive or the hard drive either, so I had to take those away before I dishwashed it. I have run optical drives through the dishwasher and floppy drives, but never a hard drive, because the water would probably find a way to get in there since they're not 100% perfectly sealed. This thing is definitely operating again. There's our little green pilot light friend on the motherboard, sitting there right next to the front panel indicators connection. So I guess I'll let this thing run for a bit. And don't worry, I will put it the rest of the way together just like it's supposed to be. Maybe I'll even find something to do with it. Another one of these with this same board in it is actually presently my ERPXE server. Again, I promise that video is coming, hopefully sooner rather than later, since it seems like they're never going to get a new release out. And the old busted stuff is better than the new hotness, even if it's not quite perfect. So maybe I'll find some time to talk about that in the near future. But for now, folks, this video has definitely run its course. So I thank you very much for watching. If you've made it this far, I didn't plug the keyboard in. It's a sure sign that it's late and I need to go to sleep. But before I close this up, and yes, I know you're not supposed to do this, but again, I really don't care. I'm just going to stick this in here with the power on, and we'll see if the system actually recognizes it and lets me into setup. Hey, what do you know? Or it types 88 pages of the speaker beep. Wouldn't that be fun? Also took the opportunity to flash the latest BIOS onto this machine before I went ahead and put it through the dishwasher. Because, you know, there might be a bug in the BIOS that keeps it from being successfully dishwashed or something. Thank you all for watching, especially if you've stuck it out with me this far. I certainly do appreciate it, and I want you to know that. To the crickets, please go die in a fire already. Thank you very much. For everyone else, if you have something you'd like to say in the form of a video comment, By all means, I would certainly like to hear it, and as always, I thank you for watching, and of course, I encourage you to leave a comment if you should happen to have one.